Afternoon and welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the presentation of our data sharing playbook and a masterclass, if you so want, in data sharing. We have an absolutely fantastic lineup of speakers today. And before we start, I think I'd like to thank the speakers, but not only for the effort of coming today, but actually for all the effort and their willingness to share experience and expertise in data sharing from quite a large number of different European projects. And so I hope you will agree with me that this looks really fabulously interesting. And so what we'll do today is to have a bit of an introduction. I'm going to hand over to Magda Cheblu from FPA, who has been leading the work on the data playbook in a second. After that, we'll go through the playbook, but also hear from some case studies. But most importantly, I think we'll have time for a lot of questions and answers, and I hope it's going to be an interactive and interesting discussion. So if you have any questions, then don't hesitate. Do put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many of the questions as possible during the webinar today. But with that and without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Magda from FPA to introduce the effort. So please, Magda.
Thank you very much, Niklas, for the welcome. Thank you for having us, and thank you also for the opportunity to present this work, which is a result of a true public-private collaboration based on experience from public-private collaboration. So I think fully in tune with what IHI is and stands for. The reason why we have done this data sharing playbook is very practical. Data is an essential component of every research project. Not only IHI and IMI, but virtually every pre-competitive and competitive project is generating data, and the data sharing data is therefore also a big objective of ours. How can we facilitate the process? How can we make it easier, practical, smooth and fluid? I think it's a concern that everybody has. And the creation of this data sharing playbook is a response to a lot of frustrations from my colleagues coming to me and saying, we are actually spending a lot of time on recreating the same tools and resources for enabling data sharing in projects. We are spending time of reinventing the wheel, and that means that we are not spending that time on accelerating the start of a project or effective implementations of the projects. Bottom line is that it has an impact on resources, it has an impact on the slow start, and it has an impact on the speed of implementation of the projects. So we decided to collectively, together with private and public partners, to do something about it, and we've commissioned this playbook. This playbook is supposed to be very practical, and it contains tools that have been tried and tested, that come out of real experience, and give very concrete advice about who, what, and when should be done when planning, implementing, or exiting a project. It is not a cookbook. It cannot address absolutely every scenario and every specific situation, but it provides enough directional advice and points towards practical tools that should allow start of implementation of real solutions and creating a data sharing environment that is really effective for pre-competitive projects. We may consider evolving it in the future, but today we want to present it to you and to make sure that it is known, owned by everybody, and used by everybody, whoever you are, whether you are a large or a small company, or a public organization, an NGO, an academic or regulator. I mean, it is applicable to all pre-competitive collaborations, and we hope that today we can not only promote that, but also make you, as I said, to own it and use it. The expected impact, and I would stop here, is faster start, more effective implementation of the projects, more data shared, and in the end, more solutions for the patients. So I'd like to thank all the co-authors and collaborators and hand back to Niklas.
So thank you very much, Magda, and again, thank you to Magda and the FP office and all the collaborators from the different organizations who put a lot of time, effort, and thinking into this playbook. And as you said, we hope this is going to be very useful for our coming IHI projects. And we also hope it's going to be useful beyond IHI. I think many of the scenarios and the issues that are coming up and described in the playbook also frequently occurred in many other European collaborative research projects. Before we kick off, I think we have a little Slido, a little questionnaire starting. So if you bear with us, if you go to slido.com or scan the QR code and enter the passcode, there will be an opportunity to put in some thoughts and some questions. So I think we can just leave this here for a second, and then there will be data coming forth. So we have quite a lot of attendees. We can put the Slido link in the chat, and perhaps we can now move to the results. So I think we're starting to see a bit of a word cloud. I think that will grow during the meeting. But as you see, it's ethical, legal issues, privacy issues, and the orchestration, I think, of the ethical, legal, and privacy issues that really is a recurrent problem in many of our projects. And I think that's really at the heart of what we're going to hear. So while we see the word cloud building, I'm going to hand over to Eva Molero from Team IT Research to lead the next session. So please, Eva, and thank you for joining and thank you for contributing to this.
Thank you, Niklas. I'm going to share my screen now. Hope you can see it. Okay. Very good. I hope it's visible to everyone.
We can see the screen very well.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. So we're going to spend this first minute to give you an overview of the data sharing playbook. I'm Eva Molero from Team IT Research, and together with colleagues Gary Saunders from EADRIS and Jan-Willem Boyten from Ligature, we're going to give you a glimpse of the structure and the content and the approach that we have followed to build the playbook, obviously with many collaborators from FP and public side alike. So the playbook is intended, as Magda and Niklas mentioned, to provide insights on the bottlenecks that make data sharing difficult in IHI projects, together with also strategies and tips and tools that will facilitate and anticipate these bottlenecks and also help overcome them. So the overall aim is to accelerate data sharing, not only in IHI projects, but in any collaborative research project that we can encounter in other contexts as well. If you think of a project as a journey, I would like to use this metaphor of the traveler that before embarking on a trip collects and packs different items that could be useful to enjoy a hassle-free travel. And so in the same way, while building the playbook, we have considered the content, the approach, and the format that are intended to make it an interactive tool, flexible tool that can be adapted to the different circumstances of projects with visual content that is pragmatic, that is solutions-oriented, and provides connection to more than 50 resources that go from examples, templates, schematics, and publications which are relevant to the topic at hand. Here you see the index of the playbook, which is kind of the navigation map. I'd like to point out at the left side bar where you can see the different sections that compose the playbook, which are also color-coded and are always visible and accessible. So it allows the users to jump back and forth to the different sections which are connected between them to look for the content that's most relevant for their needs or for the question at hand. I will stop in this very informative section, which is around the key decisions to unlock data sharing. And here what you can see is decision tree visual that goes along the project life cycle from topic writing to proposal preparation to project implementation or execution, and walks the users through the key questions to be made as early as possible to ensure a smooth flow of data, starting from defining at the very beginning the data sharing goal, then the type of data that is needed, and then as we go towards the implementation of the project, the data flows, the data management plan, the informed consent, and so on. So you can see this depicted in the decision tree. What is noteworthy, I think, is that it has each decision is connected to a number of resources that you can see here in gray, and you can access them directly by clicking into the resource identifier. And you can, again, as I said, navigate back and forth through the decision tree and the resources. Another very interesting section is regards the different roles that need to be involved in data sharing discussions and decision making. And this comes from the fact that we found out that many of the bottlenecks and delays that happen in projects in data sharing come from the fact that not everyone is invited to participate at the right time. And here, with the help of the community, we have identified the main roles that participate in data sharing, going from the principal investigator of the project to experts on GDPR, on security, lawyers, the therapeutic leads, and so on, right? And we describe them here in the playbook, but also we have created a resource in the resources section that is an interactive page where by clicking in each of these roles, it highlights the steps and the phases in which each of these experts needs to be involved. And this goes across the 5 different challenges that around which the playbook is organized. And I will hand over now to Gary Saunders to walk us through the challenges.
Excellent, thank you, Eva. So yes, in these next slides, I'll introduce the 5 key challenge areas that we have in the playbook. And it'll be screenshots that's taken directly from the playbook that I'll show. So the playbook is available online. You can find it on the IHI website and hopefully follow along at the same time as I talk us through these challenges. And the 5 are public-private partnerships and data sharing culture. Then we'll talk about legal and intellectual property, internal processes, security and technology, and then the 5th challenge that we'll talk about, and the final one of the playbook, will be the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And the reason that we chose these 5 key challenge areas were that in our consultations with roughly 30 FPA companies, these were the common challenges that come up time and time again. So in this slide here, we can see the screenshot of the presentation of the first challenge area on public-private partnerships and data sharing culture. And the way that we describe each of these challenge areas is the same in each case. So to walk you through this slide, we have the introduction and context to describe the topic and the challenge and where it lies. And then from our consultations and also our own experiences in projects, we addressed various frequently asked questions that cover this key challenge area. So here in this one, for example, we can see in the italicized text, 1, 2, 3, 4 key questions that we look at. In each of the FAQs, these offer the practical guidance to address the challenge at hand. So again, these come from our consultations with FPA companies, but also from successful strategies that have been employed in IHI projects to address the FAQ. Next slide, please, Eva. So again, here on this next slide, we see the same structure, this time addressing the challenge of IP, so legal and intellectual property. Next slide, please, Eva. And as we move to the third challenge area, this time on internal processes, I want to draw our attention to the resources that are associated with each of the frequently asked questions. So these resources are links where we have captured and catalogued valuable resources that help address the question related to the challenge area. Now, typically, these are web-based resources. So, for example, I've highlighted here the data sharing policies of Beavly members. And if one was to follow that link, it takes us to outside of the playbook, but to template best practices for data sharing that could be used maybe in templates, for example. If we jump back to the data sharing playbook, another type of resource that we catalog is publications. So if we move to the next slide, please, Eva. Then here we have highlighted a publication, an opinion piece that describes the arguments for data sharing in large consortia, including PPP. And so if we go back to the data sharing playbook on the next slide, this structure is the same across all of the 5 challenge areas. And if we look here at the security and technology challenge area, we can again see the intro and the context, the FAQs, and also the resources. Next slide, please. So here, as we move to a screenshot of our final of the 5 challenges, this time focusing on GDPR, I want to highlight a third type of resource, which we created specifically for this playbook. And when we follow this type of resource, it takes us to a place already within the playbook, but which is custom content. So if we highlight here the involvement of roles in data sharing decisions, which is something that Eva highlighted previously, this is a completely interactive schema, which is based on the position and expertise of those involved, where they're involved in the decision to share data within consortia. So I've highlighted here, the radio button at the top here is for GDPR expert, and we can see the areas for the decision, data sharing decisions that they're involved in. But it's also possible, for example, to highlight the DPO, the PI, etc. And so this is the way that we have designed the playbook for content, but also for navigation of these 5 key challenge areas. So now I pass to Jan Willem Buiten to introduce how we can transversally navigate the playbook, looking at multiple challenges simultaneously. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will take you to the challenges in practice. So what did we learn when talking to IHI projects and other projects about these challenges? So next slide, please. And when starting with the playbook, we started to interview a large group of key stakeholders from a diverse set of projects, more than 20 to 30 of these stakeholders, scientists, legal experts, data managers, project managers of the project. So quite a diverse subgroup. Oh, you're going a bit fast now. Yeah. And the key message we got from them was that underestimation was the underlying problem that made data sharing such a difficult thing. But the good news was that we also could distill quite some best practices from these projects. So basically, we got the good, the bad, and the ugly from them. And to start with the last part, so the ugly. So yeah, what were the red flags that we could distill from these interviews? All kinds of underestimating. And so leave it to the lawyers. We already have a template. We deal with it later. We have plenty of time. But also some partners go in completely naively and think that they can use the data they use from day to day in their own organization. They can simply use it in the project with their partners in the project. So all kinds of red flags that were listed. And yeah, when we go to the next slide, I think the most what we did was not really summarize all these interviews specifically, but we created 2 fictitious projects. So a best case scenario and a worst case scenario. And we collected there everything we learned from these interviews and across a timeline, which you see here on the top, starting at topic writing in year -2 till the very last day of the project in year 5. And across each of these stages, in this case, it's about the proposal preparation stage. We list what a typical best practice will do at the left-hand side and what a group of scientists that go in completely naively would do, and illustrate what happens in terms of challenges in both cases. Next slide, please. No, that's the previous one. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So, and a common message across all these projects and the message that we share as a team as well is that everything starts with a common understanding on the data flow. You should not start with the legal side, but really try to understand the data flow of your project. And that sounds pretty trivial, but since you have a large project with all kinds of stakeholders involved, it is important to do the homework and start with the data generation or data collection, and then go all the way who is going to manage the data in the course of the project and who is going to analyze the data. Both consider the parties inside the project and outside the project that are likely to analyze the data. And that usually can be condensed in a quite simple data flow as illustrated here. And at the end of the data playbook, we included quite a few examples of data flows as generated in projects to basically inspire you. But usually we consider it a good practice to collect these data flows in the data management plan and include that data management plan also in your consortium agreement. Next slide, please. And once you have done your homework with the data flow, then you can look at the legal side, and then you know which parties are involved and which handover of data between project partners have to be covered in the data governance. And then it's often a matter of reusing templates that have been generated in other projects already. And also for that, we included 1 or 2 data flows with examples how the various relations are covered in some of the projects that we have been interviewing. And an example you see here. Next slide, please. So what are the key messages that we derive from these interviews and which have been captured in the playbook? So I think the good news is that data sharing is really not rocket science, but don't underestimate it. It's a lot of work. So it is important to start early. You should front load any action that you can front load. And Eva already showed a decision tree on what to do when. So please consult that and it will help you. And maybe it's more of a matter of project management at the end of the day than a legal problem. So you have large projects, many stakeholders, many dependencies, careful planning, start early. So all of that is basically project management as you learn it in your project management course or handbook. And only when you have sorted all of that out, it becomes a legal problem, but hopefully it should be a fairly trivial legal problem at the end of the day. So the number 1 recommendation and maybe the number 1 take-home message from this playbook is start with the data flow and do that early and collect it in your data management plan. And with that, I think we conclude our bird's eye overview of the playbook. And I think we will do another poll in Slido. Yes, there it is. So please go back to Slido if it's still open. And the question that we have is, which of the 5 challenges introduced in the playbook is the biggest one for you? And just to refresh your memory, so we're talking about the public-private data sharing process, the legal IP, internal processes, security, IT, or GDPR. So may we have your votes, please? And I think we're now going to switch to Slido. Yeah, there we go. And I think with this, I hand over to the organizers of this webinar.
Yes, thank you very much, Jan Willen. So my name is Catherine. I'm a member of the communications team at IHI, and I'm going to be moderating the next couple of sessions where we will have case studies from some projects that have actually used elements of the playbook in their work. So first up, I would like to invite the team from Optima to switch on their cameras. So we have Carla Goddard from Pfizer and Andreas Kramer from ITTM, who will be sharing with us today. So I think we can see Andreas's screen there. Andreas, if you can just put it into presentation mode, because right now we see it in presenter mode. And Carla's there as well.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry. Some things
No
you have to do first, then things moving. Okay.
I'll just let Andreas get the presentation showing nicely.
Is it now better?
We can't see it at the moment.
Oh, that's not better. That's worse. Okay, let's try it again. Freigeben. PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, that's it. That's perfect.
Okay.
Oh, no,
but
it's
you
gone into.
don't see this in the big one.
And now we're in the presenter mode again. Otherwise, we can share it from our screen here if you'd like. But maybe just while we get started, Andreas, maybe you can just briefly give us a description of the Optima project so that people can understand a little what the project's
Sure.
about.
First of all, thanks, Catherine. Sorry for the IT hiccup. I think if nobody else than me, it's typically the person who's catching that. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. And yeah, the Optima project, I believe, is a very interesting one in multiple aspects. The acronym stands for Optimal Treatment for Patients with Solid Tumors in Europe through Artificial Intelligence. And it's one of the large European consortiums under the umbrella of the IHI, obviously. We do have 38 partners in 14 countries with quite a different, coming from quite different fields and having different expertise. And our aim is really to advance treatments and facilitate decision-making of physicians and patients in 3 different areas, cancer areas, namely prostate, breast, and lung cancer. And one of the interesting aspects I will come in a second is that the project started 3 years ago, so actually before the playbook was available. But as I had the pleasure to be part, and ITTM was part of the drafting team, and like Jan Willem just mentioned, the importance of the understanding of the data flows was one of the very important points also for us. We started on this and focused on the data flows in Optima from the very beginning. So we mapped our needs, like do we have to plan to transfer data to a central place, or do we build a federated infrastructure, meaning data stays decentral, and we organize use and access instead. So obviously we can do certain things with the Omicron data model, for example, but it was really important to navigate the different and the complexity, the different needs and the complexity of the different partners.
Okay, thank you. And Carla, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the really biggest data-related challenges you faced in the project.
Yeah, so I think from, as Andreas said, Optima is a large public-private consortia, but as with all IHI and IMI projects, we were bringing together a wide range of stakeholders, both across the partners, so in terms of across academia, FPA, SMEs, but also I think especially from the data sharing aspect, from within the partner organizations. So even within Pfizer, you're bringing together a large group of stakeholders that perhaps don't work together ordinarily in order to make data sharing happen within Optima. And I think that's a challenge that crosses all of the challenges that are addressed in this playbook. And the playbook allows different stakeholders, whether you're from academia, whether you're from FPA, whether you're a legal or whether you're a project manager, to identify and develop a shared understanding of where they are, what their role is from a GDPR perspective or from a process perspective. And I think doing this early on helps to identify where there is potential to be misalignment or disagreement. And I think, as Andreas said, we did the data flow early on, and I think it helps to early on identify issues that are occurring, and develop that shared language that I think everybody needs in whatever difficult problem you're trying to address.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you mentioned as well, when we've discussed this in the past, that all the issues of different types of data sharing that happen and how Pfizer has done both of these. Could you discuss that a little bit more?
Apologies, that it froze just then for me.
Oh, no worries. Sorry about that. So when we discussed this in the past, you've just told us that one of the important things is to clarify the nature of the data sharing that's going to happen and how Pfizer has done both of the different ways you can share data. Could you
So
expand
Andreas,
on that a
sorry,
little
if
bit?
you just move on one slide. So yes, I think the playbook is giving you a shared language, and particularly in Optima, where we had a hybrid model for the different ways of sharing data. This meant that stakeholders were coming from completely different understandings. So Pfizer were kind of sitting in the middle of here, because we were planning to share data both via the federated system as well as sharing our data centrally. But I think that the nature of how you are sharing data can massively influence what is important to you and what you see as the issues. And so I'll hand over to Andreas to speak a bit more to how Optima was set up, potentially on the next slide. Andreas, if you just move on.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's also here very important that, this bridging, not only between industry, academia, but also, having SMEs in the academic part of the consortium, but actually being a corporation, is a very important aspect. And again, how are the flows being understood? And Carla said it, a clear understanding. Do we use the term in the correct way, in the same way, or is there a misunderstanding because I'm coming from a different background actually? And having the playbook in hand, having the data flows mapped, graphically even mapped, helped a lot to build the trust, but also B, really understand what is the data being used for and how the data is being used for and in which mode. So I think SMEs being involved is, for me, a very important aspect to support the bridging aspect, because we tend to speak both languages. SMEs like ITTM, who are dedicated for data management, might have here even an additional aspect. We are not the only ones, obviously, but really to support building the trust, building the transparency of what happens with the data, I think is really key. And like Carla said, in Optima, we do have a hybrid situation where we expect certain data being placed in a central location available for all beneficiaries, but certain data not being possibly legally, politically even sometimes, to be placed in such a central place can still be used and accessed by all partners in a federated way, like I said. And that is a challenge in itself, and I'm pretty sure the other use case will talk about this as well. And but the more you have this graphically and transparent for people, and as we keep saying, that is the same language, the better it is, and the more trust is basically in there.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, and I think, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just from Pfizer's perspective, because I think the advantage of ITTM building the data flows and us working together at the beginning is that even though Pfizer has had to work through, and it's taken a lot longer, back to the first presentation, it took longer than we expected, because we were able to identify our role in the project, and we knew we were going to be sharing centrally. And therefore, we knew that we needed to work out how we were going to get data physically from one country to another. And you could discuss what that meant from a GDPR perspective, etc. But also when we were talking with Optima in terms of what was needed from a technical infrastructure perspective for the federated way of sharing Pfizer's data, it meant that we've been able to work for 18 months on getting that data into the Optima project, but it's still been provided within the first 3 years of the project, which to some may sound like a long time, but I think within the world of IMI2 and sharing data, it's been a long journey, but we've got it in at the point at which it is able to be used by the Optima project. And I don't think that would have been possible without having the early data flows, etc. And I think it's really helped us internally as well as the project as a whole to achieve that.
Okay, thank you. And Andreas, maybe you could talk a little bit more about Optima's data sharing journey more broadly, and as you mentioned, how the challenges that you faced helped in the shaping of the playbook in some ways, because you were both working in Optima and on the playbook.
Yeah, it was kind of sitting on both sides at that same moment in time. As said, we came, and I think this was one of the aspects we brought in with the process thinking a lot. Also, when we designed the playbook, as you can see, the drafting team has different skills and backgrounds, and so therefore it was for us very fundamental to bring this in, this aspect of, you know, how do we actually describe the process, the evolution, the way through it, the life cycle, if you like, of the data, and then have this directly also in a sense, or in a way, in a project being lived and executed, and also get this feedback. Then, you know, it's not only a theoretic exercise, it's actually also working in practice. And yes, Carla mentioned correctly, our time frames we are talking here might be still longer than we hoped, but considering and knowing other projects, I still believe as well this is a step in the right direction to speed up a process which is notoriously taking long, because we kept in the past notoriously going back to square one and forgetting everything we learned beforehand. And now hope this is a kind of yeah, I'm not saying impossible, but it's much easier to build on the knowledge and not just having the luck maybe of a seasoned expert or a seasoned colleague in the organization who knows all of that because of hard time, and other people who might want to join that, even not being an IHI project, you know, can learn from this as well. So it was really in the same moment in time, drafting, writing down what we lived in Optima.
Okay. And Carla, for you so far, what are the most useful resources? What are the ones that you keep going back to in the playbook?
So I think there are two. So one is the glossary. So back to the shared learning is having the shared understanding. And I think having a glossary of terms that everyone can go to and point to, bringing hopefully everyone onto the same page much more rapidly. Because I think a lot of misunderstanding can come from someone's idea of data sharing being different to somebody else's. So giving you the language to be able to converse in these conversations, independent of where you are in what we're calling the game. So I think that was one resource that I go back to again and again. And then the data flow, giving you ideas, adding in the terminology. So for example, are you a joint controller or are you a processor? Adding that into the data flow and assigning the roles to people early on is, I think, the key thing to us. That's almost like the core document that we have always been going back to, because I think it lays out to everybody where they are, what their role is, and people then have the language to be able to say, this is what I understand to be my responsibility, this is what I understand to be my role within the project, therefore this is what I will need to be able to participate. And it gives a framework for people to be able to converse and identify areas that need more work. Because I think, as was said previously, this isn't rocket science, but it does take a lot of collaboration, a lot of trust, and a lot of work to make it happen. So I think putting framework in place through shared terminology and a data flow that everyone can look at and understand has been for me the most useful resources so far.
And maybe I can add, because it was also mentioned earlier, the underestimation of complexity, time needed, etc. You know, having such a framework, having the glossary, having the data flow, obviously you cannot put everything in one single workflow because it's very complex in the different projects, and not every project is running exactly the same way. But it gives you a guiding principle, and again, it gives you also the understanding you have to look not left and right, but you do have to have a bit of flexibility in order to go forward. And it's not because A says so and you have to do it. No, it's in the nature of the process, and it's really helping to understand it's a journey, not to underestimate the amount of work and transparency being needed. And again, it's a huge trust building process.
Okay. And one other question, I mean, obviously you've benefited hugely from the resources that are in the playbook. Are there areas where you think we still need to do some work on aligning processes and simplifying things a little bit?
Well, I keep saying it's a living process, so there is definitively a life after the first version of the playbook. Where it goes, well, it depends also a little bit where, some people might put the importance, and that might not everybody might agree with all the steps. But I think the playbook is a great start, and it has definitively a view in the future. We have a couple of blue elephants like the EHDS and others in there, so we might have to adapt the playbook in a certain moment, or the processes there also to this. So I'm pretty sure this is not the end of the journey, but it's a living process. It's a journey towards a better use of the resources we do have, and hopefully not always going back to square one and forgetting the past.
So not reinventing the wheel.
Exactly.
And you've said as well that this is something that you've seen has application way beyond IMI and IHI as well.
Absolutely, and we are already using it in Horizon Europe projects. And one aspect which I didn't mention, but obviously it's just another of the blue elephants, is security is not yet in the playbook at maybe as an adequate level. So there is a lot we can do and benefit from others, and others can benefit from us. Yes.
Right, thank you. Anything else you want to add on the data work you've done in Optima before we wrap up this session?
Well,
no, just to say the Optima project has been a joy to be part of, and I think the public-private partnership model has really lent itself to exploring how best different partners can share data. And I think the playbook is a brilliant example of how these public-private partnerships above the projects can really drive forward areas that need to be explored.
Nothing more to say. Perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, both of you. So now, and again, if you have any questions, you can send them to us via the chat. But now I would like to invite the team from IDERA to switch on their cameras and their microphones. So we have Philip Gribben, who is from the Fraunhofer Institute for Translational Medicine and Pharmacology, and Maria Badaji Cruz, who is from the Janssen Pharmaceutical Companies of Johnson & Johnson. So I can see the slideshow becoming operational there. And if I can invite you, I don't know if you have your cameras on. I can't see you at the moment because of the screen. But maybe we can start with you, Philip. Can you just tell us in a few words a little bit about the IDERA project? What are its goals and what is it doing? I would add as well, this is an IHI project as well, so not an IMI one like Optima. I don't know if you're there, Philip. We can't
Right,
hear
yeah.
you.
Okay, you can
Oh,
hear me now, I think.
yes, we can.
Okay,
Good.
sorry about that. Yeah,
No worries.
thanks so much for the opportunity to talk a little bit about our IDERA project. And I think, we're very much in the position where we benefited significantly from the work done by the Playbook team. Our project also has a large number of partners, 33 partners, and we started in April of last year as actually one of the very first tranche of IHI projects. And we have ambitious goals, and if people are okay, sometimes sharing of the missions of an organization is sometimes a little bit corporate, but actually I think it's quite important here in our case. So IDERA stands for the integration of heterogeneous data and evidence towards regulatory and health technology assessment acceptance. So we've got sort of two basic goals in IDERA. One is to create an infrastructure that infrastructure should eventually be open to both internal and external users of that infrastructure. And the users can be those who are data holders, data analysts. There could be academic groups, clinical groups, industrial organizations, regulatory organizations. Others, the idea is an open platform. We're looking at models around our access models are primarily federated, but we do have centralized approaches in some small way, and that's especially in the case where we're wanting to validate the algorithms that we're seeking to develop. So we're developing machine learning and AI-based algorithms for the analysis of these data. So we really want to act as a kind of a connector between data holders and the potential users of those data, wherever they're from. But we're primarily interested in the secondary research-based use of data and the reuse of data. We do have another very important activity within IDERA, which is to sort of understand what the benefits are of bringing together these heterogeneous data sets, creating large aggregated sets, which are then used as the basic substrate for model development and use, and trying to gain improved insights into human health and disease. So we want to be able to produce policy recommendations around the use of real-world evidence, around the use of real-world data, and propose those towards the regulatory and HTA decision-making organizations. And finally, if people will, again, bear with me, all projects have goals. And our goals are fundamentally around creating this federated data space, and we're looking externally at situations like the development of the European health data space, the AI related legislations which are there. But we're going to create a data space, but a technical data space and a lot of AI algorithms mean nothing. They're pointless. There is no value to them unless there's data that you can access. So we're really, in parallel to the work we've been doing, informed by the work of the data sharing playbook, to design our architecture and design our infrastructure, bearing in mind all of what we've been talking about in terms of the need to map out data flows, etc., for different use cases. When we're doing that, if we're doing that without access to data, then it's very, very difficult. So we've really spent a lot of time around data governance, data access, data privacy, to really make sure that we can access data consistently and use that to test and evaluate this infrastructure that we're hoping that we're in the process of building, and the first version will be available very soon for internal testing.
Okay, thank you. And can you tell us a little bit then about the data challenges that you've faced in the project and how you've approached them?
Yeah, I mean, there's significant. I can pop down to some of the sort of key challenges that we have, and this is not our first rodeo, as it were, when it comes to data access. And personally, and with Jan Willem and some of the ligature team, we were involved in previous projects. There was an IMI project called FAIR Plus that was seeking to really understand how improving the FAIR level of findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability of data, how the fairness of data could be improved. And there was a lot of technical work being done there. And this was prior to the data sharing playbook. But in that project, we had 20 IMI projects where we were looking to gain access to data. And that was extremely challenging because we wanted to get access to discovery data and preclinical data, and also clinical data itself. And a significant part of that we were sort of learning by doing at the time. And I think a lot of those experiences went into the data sharing playbook principles. But a lot of that was around building trust with the data providers. Now in the world of IDERA, which is sort of followed on in some way from that FAIR Plus project, one of the major challenges that we're facing actually is that we need to create a data governance model which meets the needs of our internal data holders. So we have multiple clinical sites within the network. We will be providing data for a variety of use cases, and our indication is lung cancer, and we're interested in detection and diagnosis and prognosis type analysis on lung cancer data. But we've got internal data holders, and we have a governance and a data access model for that internal data. And what that does is that those use cases demonstrate the value of the infrastructure. So we can say the infrastructure that we've designed, the standards that we've chosen to use, for instance, OMOP for the electronic health records, for our clinical data, DICOM for our imaging data. We made the right choices. We created a useful performative infrastructure, and we do that with those data from the internal data sources. But long term, we're not building this infrastructure for ourselves. We want to build it for users and for the widest variety of users coming from outside of our organization. So therefore, we need a scalable data governance and data access model. And it's been extremely useful to sort of build on the work of the data sharing playbook to try and design what that will be in the future. And those future customers and future users of the infrastructure are the ones that will allow us to be scalable and sustainable, and that's extremely important. Other challenges are around since we're building a secure processing environment, there's a need to align with legislations within different EU countries, the changing shape of what's coming out from the European health data space and the different legislations which are emerging from there, and that's all happening. We're sort of building the aeroplane as we're going along a little bit, but I think we're doing a reasonable job. And what we tried to do was to sort of distill this experience from previous projects like FAIR Plus, the requirements that we have to create this connection between data holders and data users, not just for ourselves, but for this wider community. And we've tried to create a data access framework built on the data sharing playbook principles, where we really emphasize the role of the data management plan, the role of having the data flows fully enunciated and fully described, and having a very much reduced size of a legal agreement, the joint consortia agreement, for instance, that we have internally, and to reduce the complexity of that. So we're trying to capture the ground truth of the way that we handle data and work with data within our data management plan.
Great, thank you. And now, Maria, maybe turning to you, could you tell us a little bit about which recommendations from the playbook were most helpful to you when you were developing the project's data sharing framework?
Sure, thank you. Catherine, can you move to the next slide, please, Philip? On the next one. So yeah, so recommendations from the playbook. So I believe in IDERHA, we have advocated from the very start of the project for the early intervention of legal and privacy stakeholders. This need is clearly reflected in the definition of the roles in the data sharing playbook. It is clear that these collaborative environments cannot be built or established solely by scientists. They require the input of stakeholders that who understand the limitations, the requirements, and the conditions necessary for data sharing. So this is, in our view, essential to create a space or an environment that strikes an appropriate balance between privacy controls and research objectives. Being a part of the team for us from the very beginning has given us the opportunity to develop a framework that is fully aligned with the scientific objectives of the project, and is designed to be flexible and sustainable and scalable, as Philip was saying. Connected to these, because everything is connected in IDERHA, we have tried to align all the documents and to work together, privacy and legal, and create a framework that is really connected. Is the fact, so connected to that idea is the fact that what we have done with the data management plan, how we have interpreted the recommendations from the data sharing playbook. In a way, we have sort of elevated the role of the data management plan to being a central document within the data sharing framework. We have achieved this by, among other things, by compelling the parties already at the consortium agreement level to commit to develop a DMP that will reflect the reality affecting the processing of the data. We have also, and this has been really important, reminded the parties that the DMP is a legally binding document which they need to pay attention to. Since it's a living document, which is also something clearly stated and recommended to consider in the playbook. So, as the playbook suggests, the DMP is not meant to stay put. It's not meant to be static. It is meant to be alive and to be adapted to the needs of the project, which in turn will allow that level of sustainability and scalability that we are all aiming at. Can you change for the next to the next slide, please, Philip? So additionally, we have among the recommendations of the data sharing playbook, we have also adopted them and interpreted them in our own way and tailored them to the needs of IDERHA. I think, if I am allowed to say that, we have done it in a very innovative way. So, as I was saying, the consortium agreement recognized data management plan, but of course, the data management plan in isolation cannot work effectively because there is not a proper determination of the data flows at that stage. So, as other speakers have already mentioned, the early determination of the data flows is essential because it allows also to the consequent determination of the responsibilities and liabilities of the parties. Again, this is also clearly reflected in the data sharing playbook. So again, taking that recommendation, we have advocated for an early definition of the flows and the privacy roles within IDERHA. And this has led us to create the document that would support the DMP and work together with it and with the consortium agreement. In the case of IDERHA, we were able to conclude very early on, thankfully, that the parties were acting as joint controllers. So we had the opportunity to create that support. It's diminishing the power of these documents, but the idea that I want to convey is that both consortium or all consortium agreement, and then under that, which is overarching data management plan, joint controller, and then DPIA, which is informing the whole process, indicating the privacy risk and mitigating controls, makes the whole data sharing framework connected and aligned with the scientific objective. So I think that's the way we have interpreted the recommendations and used the recommendation from the playbook.
Excellent. So you really took the playbook as a starting point and you ran with it and applied it in all kinds of different ways and developed and adapted as you needed.
Exactly. It was a good basis. It was a good starting point, and then considering the requirements and the needs of the project, then you just develop on that basis, which is what we did.
Okay, and maybe now a question to start wrapping up this little session to both of you. What are the main learnings that you would like to highlight to the audience today in terms of the data sharing journey you've been on in IDERHA?
Maybe I can pick up on that to begin with, and just show you the slide I skipped over early on about the people, because it's about people. It's, I mean, Jan Willem earlier on said about project management, but project management is really about people. And I think where we were quite lucky is in our respect was the huge amount of expertise that we were able to bring within our consortia, and hard-won expertise from many projects, and projects that were sort of relevant to us as well, and previous projects and running projects. And I think if you can assemble the team, and I think there's a nice section in the data sharing playbook about the roles and responsibilities of the different individuals who are going to be sort of working in the team. If you can assemble that right team with the right expertises and aligned expectations and aligned objectives, then I think you can go a long way doing that. And I've been, I've been involved in several projects, and I'm involved in European research infrastructures, etc. But what really struck me, and I think was in our project, or in the IDEA project, was the way that the legal teams, especially from the public partners and the industrial partners, really worked together super intensively with the objectives of the project in mind, as well as the organizational objectives, obviously, but with the objectives of the project in mind, and creating fit for purpose solutions for that. And I think we were extremely fortunate to have sort of excellent legal colleagues who saw what we wanted to do. And I've seen it's not just scientists who get frustrated about not being able to access data and projects. It's not just the ones who want to use the data. The legal people get very frustrated as well, because they sometimes just get thrown, get me an agreement. I want an agreement by the end of the year. And actually, when we had this alignment between the motivations, the objectives, and the goals of the legal and the scientific team, as evidenced by the documents like the DMP, which sort of capturing the ground truth of what's happening on the technical side, and these very concise and much less complicated, more easy to understand joint controller agreements. I think we were that was a great thing. So the people coming together, the right people in the right roles, producing the right solutions in an aligned way, I think it was really excellent. And that's how the data sharing playbook tells us how to act, and I think we tried to do and follow that.
Brilliant. And Maria?
Yeah, thank you. So I believe a key learning from our side, and that we were lucky enough to be aligned on that, was that taking the data flows and analyzing the data flows to determine the privacy roles and consequent responsibilities, tasks, and derived liability was not discretional, was not a pick and choose. It was not a matter of discretion. That was clear to all the parties. So that's why the DMP is so extremely important, because it reflects the reality. So we wanted to consider and recognize the accountability of the controllers, or of the processors, or of the joint controllers in this case, to start from that point, to acknowledge their responsibility already, whether as data user or data contributors, and simplify the way we were going to draft the joint controller agreement. So that is an important learning from us that has taught us a lot, and has given us the chance to learn a lot about how to structure joint controller constellations. But as a sum up, I would say, you can see that in the slides. Key takeaways would be scientists and legal and privacy need to work together from the very start. Legal and privacy cannot come at the end, because otherwise, it will be a delay. There will be delay. There will be difficult negotiations. And as Carla was saying before, we will not be talking the same language, which is essential. Definition of data flows, Carla and Andreas have already mentioned that. It calls for transparency and responsibility and derived liability for the parties. So that is essential, because as soon as the data flows are there, we can identify the privacy roles of the parties. And then data management plan, single source of truth. It is the reality. The responsibility of the parties derives from the DMP. So it needs to have a lot of focus and attention from the parties. That will be all from my side. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So if I can ask Philip just to stop sharing and invite all of the other panelists to switch their cameras and microphones on, because it's time for the Q&A session. But while they're doing that, so you've seen there how 2 projects have really made use of the resources in the playbook. So I hope that's given you some good inspiration for how you can use it in your projects, whether it's an ongoing project or a brand new one that's starting. If you're applying for one of IHI's new calls, if you're looking at IHI Call 8, now is the time to be looking at the playbook. And certainly if you're thinking of applying to any of our future calls, it should be up there in your list of documents to consult when you're preparing your proposal, I would say. So the first question, and I mean, Magda, you did mention that for now we're not planning any imminent updates of the playbook, because just getting this first version was an awful lot of work, and it is an extremely good basis. But someone is saying, what can they do if they have any new insights that they think could be in the playbook?
Right, thank you. So first, let me highlight again that we think that first we need to use it and test it and try it. Then, if a feedback, if there is an important resource that is missing, and again, we cannot reflect every resource, it would become a big Christmas tree with a lot of decorations, and the sense might be lost in those. I think if there is an essential resource missing, or if the circumstances, legal and others, change so much that a change is needed, then indeed an evolution would be necessary. We are not excluding that. In which case, I think we have to think a little bit what would be the best feedback loop, and maybe after the webinar is published, we would also indicate where to send feedback if there is any, and how to share the experience. We didn't, I think we were busy finalizing this playbook, so we didn't think about what happens next. But since I have the microphone, let me also say something else. I heard several times today, and I'm not sure that it resonated really very strongly, but sharing data is a desire of everybody. And there is a lot that is being shared between public and private partners, by private partners, by public partners. It's not a trivial task. It may seem that we have the data, if you follow certain steps, it's done. What we've realized is that sometimes, despite best effort, there are some stumbling blocks, but by using what we've said in the playbook and front loading, a lot of planning, anticipating a lot of these things, it can make data sharing much easier. It might not resolve every problem. There would always be, there would always be bumps on the road, but front loading, anticipating might help a lot. And when I see the amount of data shared in IMI and now in IHI, I think that it's never mission impossible, and we should not be blocked by the first difficulty or to blame one another, because I think the everything that is in the playbook, starting from the glossary of terms, helps to, rather than finger pointing, sit around the table and first start with alignment of understanding. So I just want to say it very strongly, because again, data sharing is a goal, but it's not an end in itself. It's a mean to achieve a bigger goal, and that's why we should be doing everything to make it as smooth and easy as possible.
We have a question on the data flow. It's the person saying this was emphasized multiple times, but I don't understand its value beyond defining terminology. Can you provide some specific examples of how they use the data flow diagram in their sharing process? Carla, you were a big fan of the data flow. Maybe you could take this one?
Yes. So I think what it's critical at doing is defining the different roles that different partners will be playing, so that then when you come to the agreement, everyone is clear on where they sit on that flow. So if you are being defined as a joint controller, you are going to have different responsibilities, different access, etc., to the data that is being shared in the project to a data user, a beneficiary that is sitting further away. And I think using the data flow to assign the responsibilities from a privacy perspective, from what data different partners will be seeing, allows people to see in a very visual way. So it means that you don't have to be an expert in all the terminology. It allows you to see what is being assigned to your partner organization, and it therefore strips away a lot of the noise so that you can concentrate on what your role is in the project, and then you can have a discussion with the relevant partners. Is this what am I happy with this? And I think I can call out Andreas here. ITTM, hopefully it's okay, had some questions about the roles that were being assigned, and the data flow highlighted that really early on. And as you were saying, we got around the table and we had the discussion and we came to a solution. If we hadn't laid it out, if we hadn't assigned it, if we hadn't got that really clear picture, it might have taken us months more, and that month would be delays in the project. And as we all know, in IHI, IMI, we've got deliverables in months that don't move. So I think that would be a really practical way of how that helped us just really identify and understand everybody's individual roles and check that everyone is comfortable and understands them.
Yeah. Can I maybe add something to that when you allow me to? Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, because I was also one of the ones that emphasized this point, and I agree with all what was said. But I think it starts with even more simple things. So by drawing the data flow, you know who to talk to, because then you know who is involved and will touch the data, and then all the rest comes and defining the GDPR rules when it's about personal data. But it really starts with the beginning. So who is touching the data? And in IHI projects with so many partners and so many stakeholders, you usually don't know. So that's why it's so important.
Thank you. And another question, which is also looking actually about the roles and who does what and how much time that will take. Someone is asking, for SMEs and public entities, would you say that designating one person for data management / data playbook handling may be needed for EU PPP projects? What's the estimation of an FTE for such a role?
Maybe I can answer that.
Yeah.
I think it's not one person's responsibility. It's like it's everybody's responsibility. I mean, for instance, in the case of the data management plan, once that data management plan is being established, then nothing should happen. No working on data should happen without it being reflected in the data management plan. So everybody has a sort of a joint and several responsibility, I think, when it comes to efficient handling of data. I think when it comes to setting up the data management plan and setting up the agreements and everything, we have I think in our case, we had an amazing team from the University of Luxembourg who sort of led that DMP drafting process along with many other colleagues. But what worked really well there was having a group of technical orientated individuals who understood the data flows, understood the architecture, understood the needs, working very closely with the privacy and the privacy folk and the data governance folk as well. So I think it's not a single set of responsibilities, it's everybody's responsibility, but you need those sort of specialist sub teams to sort of drive it on within the organization, get the DMP finalized, get those agreements around amongst the partners, and act as the sort of interpreters of best practice coming from resources like the data sharing playbook.
And maybe also building on what Phil just said, it's definitively an add-on if you have an entity, university, SME, whoever, who is dedicated to data management in order to kind of have enough gravity around the topic, because in the old days that was kind of left behind the curtain, and it's kind of not being even supported with enough person months, etc. But it should not be an camouflage on the other side saying there is somebody who's taking care and I don't take care anymore. It is really this gravity center to bring everybody together. Like Phil said, everybody is involved, but with the expertise. And I think the playbook helps to transfer that message, because it's not just one smaller or bigger party saying this is the way it is. It is a common document. Everybody has the same page in front of in order to go, and it's again the transparency. So you do need experts in that, because this is really something one should not underestimate. And on the other side, it's really something everybody gets and needs to be involved in, actively involved in.
Exactly. And if I may add another note to that, the interaction of the different stakeholders would be translated, would affect the whole setup. So as I was saying before, in Idera, we have together with the scientists, privacy, legal, and other, the drafters of the DMP, those that are taking the responsibility of actually drafting the DMP, we have all worked together to align on the conditions to enable the research objective, to make them happen. So it's just working together, because otherwise the whole framework would just not function properly.
Thank you. And another question, which maybe is one for you to take first, Maria, because it's again about the data management plan. In terms of timelines, when do you start drafting a DMP for an IHI project? Is it together with the consortium agreement prior to project kickoff?
I would say we can start defining already data flows at the project proposal. I think that is a possibility. Of course, they would not be final, but already when you are defining the project proposal, you are already going to identify certain data flows. So I believe it is visible from the very beginning. Of course, as the project advances and is developed, they will be also developed, tailored, updated, but I think project proposal is a good start.
Okay.
And that, and that will also enable, Andreas, that will also determine or facilitate the determination of the roles of the parties.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, Maria, I agree with this, but we also included this in the decision tree that Eva showed. So indeed, the data flow already tried to determine that during the grant preparation, and then the condensation in the data management plan is during the early months of your project.
And maybe it was mentioned before, front loading the process, that's a term which now actually fits very much in. I think many of us remember a time there was not even a DMP in the project, and now we have this, and now we are evolving the use of it and actually putting it much earlier, as much as it's being useful. Let's be very honest. If you put a lot of work which is not funded, then you do have a problem of getting the right resources in there. But if you have an agreement and if you have kind of a framework, a guiding principle, which the playbook is providing as well, then it's much easier not to come around the corner and say, oops, it's Christmas again, I forgot about it. That situation of then starting only after the kickoff meeting, starting the DMP is putting a lot of pressure, not necessarily. You couldn't start earlier and then have things being clarified much more. So front loading here, making the right things, documenting them from the very beginning helps definitively in the end.
And I think that would also answer one of the other questions that's come in. Someone is saying that in some projects they're involved in, at the grant application stage, certain data and samples were promised, but in the end, it turned out that they weren't able to reconsent, or they didn't have the right consents or the right approvals, or legal contracts took too long to finalize, and this impacted on the execution of the rest of the project. So I guess and then they ask, what is the optimal strategy to avoid these situations? And as you say, it's to start as early as is feasible. So
maybe to add here that precisely the decision trees, all these key questions, right, come prior even to the proposal preparation. So during the topic writing, for the companies which are involved in that, also to elicit the possibility to actually share this data. And as we build the proposal and go to subsequent phases, this is something that needs to be clarified much before the project starts. And you will see it in the decision tree higher up.
So the answer is go to the playbook. You need to download the playbook, study it. It's your Bible for the next few years on anything relating to data sharing. Another question, quite a practical one on tools here. And again, relating to data management plans. The person says, I know there are tools for the support in the creation of data management plans, such as DS Wizard by Elixir. That being said, the typical process in the creation of data management plans and joint control agreements, is it done with supportive tools like these?
Can I? Shall I take that? I know
Go
the
for it.
tool pretty well. Yeah, the short answer is no. And I think that is not unexpected. So you still need to do the analysis yourself. So what's your project about, and yeah, what is the data you want to share in your project? These kind of tools can be an aid on, of course. So when you did the basic homework, it can help you to answer the right questions and things like that. So it can be a help, but it will not be the silver bullet. Huh?
Okay. And another question coming back to the issue of front loading and when to do things, how can we reconcile research timelines with data protection and legal process timelines? Sometimes it's data sets that will be generated are not known, either e.g. dataset name / identifier from an early stage, which is a detail required for a DMP. Who wants to jump in on that one? Any volunteers?
I mean, I think if I may answer this one, I think we underestimate the intervention and the help and support that legal and privacy stakeholders grant to these projects. So if we want to reduce the timelines and start sharing data right away, involve your privacy and your legal as soon as you can, because it is underestimated. In the end, scientists, and no offense taken, start working, start developing their goals, and start drafting without counting on the limitations, the requirement, the conditions, GDPR, and so on. So the soonest, the better, right? Because otherwise, again, these questions come because legal and privacy are involved too late.
Okay.
in
Thank
my
you.
opinion.
Thank you very much. It's nearly time for us to start wrapping up. Magda, as the queen of the data sharing playbook, I don't know if you want to just say a couple of words before we hand over to Nicholas.
Thank you. I wouldn't say the queen of the playbook, because there are many princes, queens, and kings here, and no joke. I think really this playbook is a result of solid experience, and those solid experience people are here. We merely coordinate the work around that, and we really put in your hands a tool that might help. I'd like to highlight again, there is sometimes a little bit of a tendency to finger point and to think that it's the other side that is responsible for the problems, while in reality we all hold the key to making the processes better and smoother. And here, I think we've demonstrated by bringing public and private partners together with both imperatives and experiences that you can align. You can provide tools that would fulfill everyone's needs and imperatives. And that's why we think that this tool, it's a nice tool to use to try and to make your research faster, better, and more impactful in the end. And I think that would be my closing statement.
Thank you very much. So we don't have any more questions for now. So I would say before we hand over to Nicholas, you should all have the link to the playbook now. We've been sharing it on social media. It's on the IHI website. We put it in the chat here. Go away and look at it, study it, use it. And on that note, I will hand over to Nicholas.
So thank you very much, Catherine, and thanks everyone who contributed to today, both the speakers, the case studies, Magda, the queen, or maybe even the queen mother then of the playbook. But as I think we've seen, and we've seen that from the questions, this is really one of these non-scientific activities that really are on the critical path for project success. And in IHI, and I think we could see that from our case studies, I mean, our projects are meant to be ambitious. Our projects are ambitious. They are large. They bring together a lot of organizations from many different sectors, and we bring together people, data, and tools from these organizations to do something completely novel and often quite cutting edge. So that is difficult. And I think if there's one thing I took away from the work with the playbook and the seminar today, is really how important it is to put aside both resources and get the right expertise into your consortia to deal with these non-scientific critical path activities, because it is really important for the success of these projects. And that's true for the portfolio we have. I think it's going to be true for most projects that we can think of in the future. They will live and die by the effectiveness of bringing together data and being able to analyze data of different types and from different organizations. So I think this is really a topic which is at the sort of central to the success of any modern health or medical research program. And that's why I'm really happy and grateful to the people who've decided to share their time, their expertise, and their knowledge in this playbook. So as Catherine said, go away and use it. And I hope we'll see many of you in IHI proposals and projects for the future. And if you're interested in the program and you haven't looked at it in detail, we have calls open right now, closing 10th of October. So if you're starting, you might be a bit late, but it's not too late. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for contributing and everyone for listening in. So thank you, and back to you, Catherine, to close.
Thank you. So that's it from us. We do have, I will also add some more events coming up. If you want to get a bit more involved in IHI, see what we're doing and what is coming next in our calls. So do go and visit our website, check out the events page and put those dates in your diary as well. But otherwise, thank you very much to all the speakers and thank you to you for your presence here and for your interest. And yes, enjoy reading and using the playbook. Thank you.